And then also we've got like the labels of sexuality. Everyone has to be labelled by their sexuality. I'm pansexual, I'm freaking this, that and the other. Like everyone's got a label about freaking everything now. And I'm just like, I think it's really unhealthy. I think it gives people excuses, and I think it unstabilizes society. Right, today I'm talking to Hayley, who is
a primary school teacher and mental health lead and special needs coordinator.
So I want to talk to Hayley today about the state of mental health in schools and what they're teaching and stuff, because I fundamentally disagree with a lot of the stuff. I think we're raising children to be absolute wimps. We're not giving them any resilience. But I want to thrash out of Hayley, because obviously you've been working in schools for like 10 years,
yeah.
And this has been Hayley's role within schools. So I want to get to like the bottom of it, see if I've got some like wrong views on stuff, but maybe I can, we can shed light on what's going on in schools, because I know a lot of people are concerned about it.
Okay.
So anxiety, let's start there. So my belief has always been that anxiety is like a mental state where like basically people are too anxious to move, too anxious to do anything. Maybe they're boxed in by feelings, and so it prevents them from going out and achieving stuff. But what is like the definition of anxiety?
Okay, so if you think, we'll start with fear. Okay, so fear is something that's instilled with you as like a fight or flight response. So it's primarily stopping you from getting in danger, which has probably evolved over a long period of time. And we'll get into what fear looks like now in comparison to like Neanderthals. Anxiety is more, it's forward thinking. So fear is present danger, scared right now because of a threat, an immediate threat. Anxiety is more of a fear of what's ahead, a fear of the future, and a response that's more associated with emotions than an immediate threat. Okay, so anxiety can present itself physically, so people can obviously have symptoms related to breathing, so breathing can quicken. It can lead to intrusive thoughts. So there's the difference between thoughts and feelings there as well, so it's quite complex. But yeah, on the whole, anxiety presents itself as almost a barrier to experiencing the present and stopping you from feeling,
So why do like predominantly anxious people have anxious kids, whereas like unanxious people seem to sort of produce kids who are, like 90% are confident and don't have like anxiety and things like that? For me, I feel like it's the language in the houses, it's how parents portray stuff. It's we've talked before about like on a sort of different subject. It's like people set, like their kids will say, "I'm full," and it's like, "Oh, 2 more bites." It's like, well, now you're teaching them to overeat. So when they say they're full, let them be full, leave their food on the table, and then in half an hour, if they're badgering you, go, "No, you go and eat your food that's left on the table."
Yeah.
But people teach their children to overeat, and so in the same way, I feel like people almost put their anxiety on their kids.
It is quite common that some presentation of anxiety can be a learned behaviour from children. So, for example, I've known and experienced parents quite rightly admit that they are particularly worried about certain things. Often it's they'll say that they're worried about something and they're worried that their child will also worry about that. And you're right in terms of the language that they're exposed to, because some of it is learned behaviour. But I think as well, like it's I wouldn't agree with that, because I think anxiety it manifests, it's co-occurring, it can be part of another condition, whether that's autism, whether that's ADHD. So it's not necessarily something that can be cured. You need to think about strategies and actions, which are right, actions can cure particular anxieties, but it can be co-occurring, so it's more complex than that. It's not just a straightforward cure.
So can you cure anxiety?
I would say that you can train your brain to think differently. So in terms of increasing resilience, so we talk about in school, children have a resilience zone, and that's what they can cope with on a daily basis, and we call it riding the wave. So we are normalising that emotions fluctuate and change. So when you were talking about feelings in the last video, being unreliable, you're totally right. But the children are being taught that. They're taught that they are riding the wave on a daily basis. They can feel up, they can feel, really happy, really excited, or they can be quite erratic because they're anxious about something, but they can also feel really down, and things can make them go out of their wave of their zone of resilience. So we talk about they actually plot certain experiences that cause them and associate them to feel up or down, and then the resilience zone, hopefully over time, when we teach them strategies, increases, so they're able to cope with a lot more and not become out of their wave.
But like I've seen since, like, especially since I was at school, and we can go back further generations, where like it seems like discipline's been thrown out the window because of like feelings of a child. So like I talk about this a lot of people, like if my dad didn't like smack me and things like that, I would have had no fear as a kid to be like, I can mess around with my mum, I can do whatever I want. I'd have been a proper tearaway, even more than I was. And so like it would only, you know, if I was messing my mum around and my dad was at work, I'd be like, wait till your dad gets home, and immediately it'd be like that fear of like my dad, because it's not the fear of my dad, it's the fear of the pain he inflicts.
But this is why it has gone the other way, because we're now more aware of trauma and something called adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
No.
If your dad's a psychopath, but if your dad's a balanced person who smacks you appropriately.
But then how would you know if your dad's a balanced person?
But that's not
if you didn't have experience. So wait, if you didn't have experience of him not being a good person, because actually if that's just within your circle of experience, you don't know any different.
Yeah, but it's not the government's right to be able to say, right, he's balanced enough to smack his kids or he's not. We know that there's crap parents throughout history. Like, in my opinion, crap parenting is aborting your kid. We'll take that out. Like, so I don't know where to cut back in. Yeah, so it's not the government's position to be like, right, yeah, like we don't know if a dad's a balanced person, so we're going to ban smacking, we're going to ban discipline in that, authoritative way. You have to now discipline your children the way we tell you. And like, look at the fallout of it. We've got kids who are freaking running around. We've got like 12-year-olds who are like squaring up to 30-year-olds because they think they're untouchable.
I don't think schools have got it right yet. So I think what's happened is we've become more aware of trauma and adverse childhood experiences, which quite rightly, not taking anything away from that, because there's some really, really bad cases where we do need to learn from that. Actually, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But we've now taken a lot of teaching from America, which they've got movements such as like conscious discipline, which has lots of different values in it. What is conscious discipline? So it's led by values. So in terms of, it does teach children like assertiveness, for example, so to stand up for themselves and to address something in the right way. So it's not saying, you know, back away and don't upset someone. It's teaching them to be assertive. So that's one of the examples. However, it doesn't agree with rewards or punishments. So even though there's some, what I would believe are really strong messages in there, in my opinion, if a child isn't rewarded from a young age, they can't necessarily develop that intrinsic motivation because they don't know what it feels like to do something good. So again, that's my own opinion, and people can... It's
funny because I don't believe in evolution. I'm a Christian. I believe that we were created. But like at one point, the school system is saying, yeah, we've evolved and this is where anxiety comes from and all these things, and like sort of they follow that pattern of like Neanderthals and like cavemen and like obviously survival. But then they're going, but we don't like rewarding and
punishment.
Rewards and punishment. Well, if we go back to the cavemen, if you didn't work hard and you were lazy and you woke up late and you didn't like hunt correctly, guess what? You didn't eat and die.
Consequences.
So freaking make your mind up. Like, what you believe
still an element of conscious discipline. So teaching consequences, but
so can you in conscious discipline or whatever it's called? Can you say, "Oi, stop that"?
No. You'd have to highlight the behaviour of another child who was like adhering or conforming. So you'd have to say, you're sat beautifully, in the hope that, obviously that's a really rubbish example, but like, you know, you're sat really well, you're highlighting the positives so they don't feel ashamed, so that they don't get to experience one of those emotions that is...
Me at 6 years old, if I'm sat there and I'm a naughty little idiot like messing the class up and the teacher goes, Gemma, well done, you're sat really well. I'm not going, hey, I want to be rewarded. I'm like, I've got free reign here, baby. It's like my teacher had to be firm with me, my dad had to be firm with me because I'm a little 6-year-old lad who wants to go out, climb trees and stuff. I don't want to be sat in a classroom. I remember my dad, when I was in year 2, the teacher was like, you know, I just get the impression that Samuel at the time, Samuel wants to be outside rather than being in the classroom learning. And my dad was like, I can 100% guarantee that is the case.
Yeah.
And the teacher was like shocked by it.
Yeah.
It's just like insanity.
But again, we've changed. We've got more awareness now of how children work, and it's not a one size fits all approach. But what I am saying is that obviously there's so many. We've got too much knowledge that we don't know what to do with it, and I don't think they've got it right yet. So I think the awareness of coming back to the mental health side of things, I think the awareness of the brain anatomically is like a real positive, and children that I was teaching are aware of the different parts of their brain and how that then makes them behave and makes them function, which I think is good because they've got an awareness of certain things that can make them feel rubbish, things that make them happy. They're developing an identity. They're thinking more about, okay, I like being outside, that might be my career path actually, and if I was feeling anxious or stressed, I'd get outside. So they're taught that.
I get the some of the positives there, but I also think that like it's creating an excuse culture, no? Like, so, like, I know that because of this happened, I feel like this, which means I don't, like, I'm not going to perform well today, or I'm not going to be as kind today, or I'm not going to, you know, I'm feeling, I don't know.
There's a fine line between, like, awareness and excuse, I think.
Like, sorry to jump in there, but, like, it just feels like kids can no longer just be kids and enjoy their childhood. It's like, we're teaching them sex education from a young age. We're teaching them about their, like, mind and feel, like, not necessarily feelings and stuff, but we're almost giving them too much knowledge. Like when I was 6 years old, it was just like, right, when's lunch? Go out, play for an hour, not care in the world. When I get home, you know, my first thought was like, I need to get into my kit and go to the park or whatever. And like, look, I'm aware that I grew up in like a pretty functional, pretty healthy family, and not every kid has my experience, of course not. But like, it just feels like we're putting so much on our kids too soon. I'm sort of thinking of the analogy of like there's a book by a woman called Corrie ten Boom, who was in Holland when it was occupied by the Nazis, and she tells this story of when they used to hide Jews, but she tells a story when her dad, they were hiding Jews and stuff like that, but she asked her dad a question. She was like a young girl, and he had this massive bag that he used to take because he was like a watch repairer, and he said to her in response to her question, can you just get we're getting off the train now, can you pick my bag up? And so she's gone over and she's like struggling with his bag, it's like a heavy bag and she's only a little girl. She's like, I can't do it. And so he knelt down and he goes, when you're strong enough to carry that information, I will give it to you. Mm-hmm. And so I feel, and that's a long-winded sort of thing to say, I feel like we are giving children stuff they are not strong enough to handle or to carry. And actually as adults, we need to protect them and actually give it to them when they're ready. That's why we took our kids out of school, because they're teaching them crap that they're not ready to handle.
I do agree with that. I think that's a really good example in terms of that progressiveness. It should be, and it is, schools would argue that this information is progressive and it's in line with stages of development. But unfortunately, we're in a society where children also need to maybe have a bit more of an understanding of other children's presentations and how a particular child might be acting out because actually circumstances at home are rubbish. So you want to build that understanding and tolerance of the other children so that child's experiences aren't getting any worse. So I think, again, it's all a balance, isn't it? And I don't know if we've got it right yet. I think the knowledge to equip children to be as holistic as possible, understanding, to develop their own identity, I think that's all really positive. But I also, obviously, I'm leaving teaching, and I think, you know, part of what you're saying is true. There's an overload of knowledge, and I think even the new government now that have come in, and I obviously won't go political, but they are backtracking on certain curriculums in PSHE because they're thinking whether that is actually relevant to what the children need to know at that time, or whether we've gone too heavy with the knowledge. And if you think about cognitive overload and all of the knowledge we're putting on the children, not just mental health wise, not just kind of, you know, PSHE wise, sex education, but maths, English, that, like all of the lessons they cover in a day, that's going to have an impact on their mental health because they are cognitively overloaded, so they feel overwhelmed. So that's partly why I believe that we're in a mental health crisis, because there's too much information. And back when you were saying about like being in charge, you think about lunchtime and stuff, like I love the children that are still like that because you want to protect that for as long as possible. And there is certain things I just think we have gone too far with. But I do think the knowledge around anatomically the brain, and for example like amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and knowing that all of their different parts of their brain have a role, that's really good. Because if someone was to act out of pure anger and do something wrong, rather than highlighting that now, and I still think there's a place to punishment, I really do, but I think they have a better understanding of why they've reacted in that way, and that's a good thing, because you've got emotional intelligence, because you're able to say, I lashed out because I was feeling absolutely rubbish because they stole my ball and they were all laughing at me, and I acted out, and that's wrong, and I shouldn't react that way.
Is it wrong?
If they've lashed out because someone's taken their ball, yes.
It depends, doesn't it? Because if
you can't go around punching everyone just because someone's taken your ball.
So
it's, you
would. Yeah, I probably would, but like it's normally when it's built up to that level, it's not that they've just taken their ball. It's probably that for like days, weeks, months that they've been getting niggled at, and then it's the final stage is they've stolen my ball and like enough's enough, boom.
I would argue that they're not. So now we've got the knowledge of that. Well, children have got an understanding that if it's overloaded, that is bullying or it's unfair. So children recognise that now, and they would be able to talk about it, because we are more of a culture that kind of promotes the importance of talking about something if you're not feeling great about it.
Bullying again is another issue I actually want to raise here, and I'm going to be hated here, but and again, I'm probably someone who works things out as I speak it. So a lot of the time, if I say something, I'm thrashing it out as I'm saying it, and I'm trying to work it out in my own mind. So not always everything I say is actually like 100% where I land in my thinking. But I think talking helps me do it. But like bullying again is like everything has been called bullying now. And so, for instance, I'll give you an example. When I joined the Marines, we were down the ranges and I was shooting, and it was obviously like my first time shooting or whatever, and I was crap, but my corporal stamped on my back, and then like sort of took the wind out of me, and he was like, apply yourself, Logan. And now, like, probably still not in the Marines it would be classed as bullying, probably wouldn't, but in the army or whatever, he'd probably like lose his job or he'd lose pay or whatever. Actually, like me in that time, if someone said like, have you just been bullied, I'd be like, no. Like, it's probably a bit of an over the top reaction, but you know what, character building, teaching me resilience, whatever, don't really care. Whereas now, like, everything's classed as bullying, and I think when I'm going to use another analogy here. I was working on a ranch in America for 3 months, and I was looking after the chickens, and I really love the psychology of chickens, which sounds mental, but they've got something called the pecking order, which is obviously where we class it from. So like, if someone's out of line, if a chicken sort of misbehaves, or they're a bit weaker or whatever, they get pecked and like all their feathers get removed by all the other chickens. Like, they all sort of gang up on them to bring them back in alignment. It can go quite far. I think chickens actually kill each other. But in society, hear me out here, if one of my mates is gaining a couple of kilos and he's getting a bit chubby, and I think it's important that I say, or one of the lads says, Sam, you're looking a bit chubby there, you need to sort your life out. And it's like, yeah, thank you. You've held a mirror up to my face, or freaking out, you reek, mate. When was the last time you had a shower? Yeah. It's like, oh, that's bullying, like my feelings and all that. And like, you can cast that go as far as you want to go. But actually, I think it's a little bit of a pecking order of like, oh, you get back into society, get back in line. In order for society to function well enough, we need to like keep each other in line. Now, because like a lot of that's been thrown out, where you can't say anything, you can't say like, you're insane for thinking that, get back in line. Now look at society, it is absolutely insane when you look at like what people believe and what you can and can't talk about, and what people are doing to their bodies. Like, we
won't go into that one today.
Well, let's go. We can go there. Like, and now children are being subjected to this, and like, oh, you're 6 years old and you feel like you're not that gender. Okay, what we'll do is we'll give you drugs and we'll remove your genitals and all that. Like, what is going on? Look,
I'm going to bring you back to the point where you said about someone saying to you, you've put on a couple of kilos, and you're like, oh, thanks for that.
At the time, I didn't say. Well, no, this actually happened with Ben Howden. I was doing judo and I was fighting in the 90 key category. I'm only 5'8", so I was muscly, but I was a bit chubby. And he come into the gym one day and he's like, flipping out, mate, you're looking a bit chubby there. You need to sort yourself out. And I sort of laughed it off, like, oh yeah, no, it's just for judo. But it stuck with me. And then actually I sorted it out, dropped my weight, and then I went into the 81 category. 6 years later, I said to Ben, who's obviously a good mate, I was like, mate, cheers for doing that, 'cause no one else had said anything. Then I looked back at pictures and I was like, flipping out, it was a bit of a mess. And so it took him to do that, whereas people go, Flip, you can't say that. Like, he's living his truth.
Yeah, I think
I've just vomited on you there, so apologies. But
I think there's so much we could unpick there. It's like unbelievable. But I think again, from a mental health perspective, and from an experience perspective, and from a processing perspective, you've obviously had very, I would say, healthy experiences. Not happy. I'm not saying if it's a healthy experience, I'm not saying things have to be good all the time. You have to have a really good life because you've had a positive life that leads you to have a positive reaction. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is you've probably had a balanced experience of a whole variety of different things. That means that resilience zone that you have is broad. It's been broadened by upbringing, by going to Afghanistan, by being in the Marines, by being a PT, by experiencing empathy and having to take people through that process of probably losing weight.
By feeling fear and doing it anyway. So like exposure therapy, which is like, and I've jumped in, so tell me to shut up. But again, this is something that's like, if you don't feel comfortable doing it or you're a bit scared or whatever, you don't have to do it. And it's actually like, that's so damaging.
I don't think we are teaching kids that, because I think like when they go on residential, for example, like if I was taking my group of year 5s to residential and there was a zip wire and they were scared of heights, it's like, right, let's rationalise it, let's talk it through. What is it you're scared of? I'm scared of falling. You physically cannot fall. You're strapped in, you've got this, you've got that rope, you can't fall. I'm scared of, I'm scared of heights. Well, what is it about heights that you're scared of? Well, now if you've not experienced it before, how do you know that you're scared? You've not actually jumped off that, but you also don't know what's the other side of that. You don't know how exciting that's going to make you feel. You don't know the buzz that you're going to get. If it's easier, close your eyes. Am I able to count to 3? And on 3, I'm going to push you. Can I push you? Is that okay? You close your eyes. Right, ready? 1, 2, on 2, push them. Then they're learning, whoa, still things are unexpected, but they're doing it and then they're feeling it.
That's amazing teaching. But you said to me, that there's kids now who are staying off school and they're putting a robot in the classroom.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I'm scared to go to school.
Right, so again, this is what I'm saying, I don't think we've got all the systems right. So there's something called EBSA, which is emotional based school avoidance. And there is a massive proportion of children now who aren't attending school. There's a whole plethora of reasons. From a personal opinion again, so I'm not saying this is fact, but I am saying it's fact, there's not enough funding in schools, so that means obviously a consequence of that is that it's not the right support for that child in school. So coming to school could be really difficult for a child who has autism, ADHD and anxiety as a co-occurring condition associated with those 2 needs. And if the support's not in the right place because the classroom is full of 5 lessons a day, you transition between this and this, there's no time for downtime, there's no PE at the start of the day to get them all focused. If the curriculum isn't well planned, thought through and individualised and bespoke for that child, they're going to find that really hard. So they're not going to want to come to school. So there's not necessarily adaptations in place to help that child be in the system. So what they're saying is, right, we're going to put a robot in that classroom so they're still able to attend and feel connected to that class, but obviously their experience isn't the same because they're not there. This
is what I'm saying, is like, when I was boxing at Birkenhead Venture in the Wirral, and it was a pro amateur gym, so some really good pros, some really good amateurs, and I would go to spars, like I would drive to training going, I'm gonna get my head punched in tonight because I know who I'm sparring. And it was like, even though I feel like this, I am driving towards my fear. I am driving towards like, and I would think about this for like days before the spar. So it'd be like Saturday and I'm like, I know on Monday I'm sparring like Masha Dodd or whatever, he's Commonwealth champion. And I know he's gonna punch my head in because I know he's gearing up for a fight. And so but again, exposure to that fear, cures it, because actually every time after a spar, even times if I got dropped or whatever, there's a lad called Ben Burnham who hit so freaking hard, I would come away from that spar like, do you know what? That was brilliant. That again, arguably, is because your zone of resilience is massive. Now, I've made that zone of resilience. You have. I could have stopped that. A 6-year-old can't do that themselves because they don't have the skills to be able to do that. And if their parenting is bad, that's what
and if they have a condition as well associated with that, that child, unfortunately, is not going to have a very good
But
experience.
I'm saying schools and government teach parents who, and it's like a cycle of like crap
Everyone-
thinking.
Yeah.
And so now they create these like unresilient kids.
That is the last resort, and I'll probably be like totally taken down for this, but like I don't agree with the robot thing, because if you're putting something in place, why would they ever want to come back in that school
They're never
system?
going to.
Why
And
would
they're
they
going to be
ever
stuck
wanna?
forever at
And
home.
I don't think, but again, there's all cases are so different. So for one child, that might help integrate them back into school, because we can't just blanket this approach. But I don't think that's right for certain children who actually need that healthy time with peers, because for example, they could be a really vulnerable child, and if they were at home with a single parent who wasn't looking after them properly, who had bad mental health themselves, that's all they're going to be exposed to. So the importance of coming to school is massive, but schools would do so, like, I know I'd fight for every single other avenue other than that robot, because I don't agree with it. So I think we need to see that as like a last resort and analyse it case by case. It can't just be your school's given a robot, right, this is for children that don't really want to come in. Like, it can't be like that. You have to do everything in your power, because at the end of the day, schools for some children, only place they're going to get a good meal, only place that they're instilled like structure, routine, the importance of like adhering to rules and to listening, turn taking, solid healthy friendships and relationships, knowing right from wrong, learning how certain things make them feel, and then probably attributing actually that I don't get that experience at home, so that's actually not right, and then eventually being able to speak up about it. Schools are a really good place for children who are really vulnerable. So yeah, I don't think the robot is the answer there.
And one last thing I sort of wanted to talk about. I mean, there's a million things we could talk about. And also, like, there's only a snapshot of actually our views that we can get on this.
Yeah, like I've probably not articulated that.
No, it's been great. And like I'm thinking of like, you're generalising everything, so you can't go from like one side of the spectrum to like, so, a really healthy kid to a kid who's like grown up in an absolute mental house. So like you can't, because there's gonna be comments like, yeah, but what about this? And it's like, obviously I'm not talking about extremes, I'm talking about like gen pop kids. But I really freaking hate this idea of like labelling kids. Like, we have got an obsession now with like labelling people. Like, for instance, like everyone's got something. Like, if I went to school now and you'd say it all the time, you'd be ADHD, you'd be a million different things. It's like,
well, I do the referrals, so I see it myself. I'm like, wow.
Yeah. And like, but like actually I was just called a naughty kid at school. Well, no, I wasn't a naughty kid. It was just like, definitely didn't have a label of ADHD. If I had an ADHD label at school now, I would like run riot. I'd be like, I am like untouchable, whatever. Then you've got, obviously you have more experience with that, but you've got, I obviously don't know what I'm talking about regarding, I've got no qualifications in any of this, but like every kid seems to be ADHD, ADD, autistic, or like freaking, like. And then also we've got like the labels of sexuality. Everyone has to be labelled by their sexuality. I'm pansexual, I'm freaking this, that and the other. Like, everyone's got a label about freaking everything now. And I'm just like, I think it's really unhealthy. I think it gives people excuses, and I think that it unstabilizes society.
There's so much that can be picked from that. I think in terms of categorising children and then feeling like they're pigeonholed to a certain area, from my experience, if a child is neurodivergent, so that we just class it as your brain works slightly differently, and actually that can be a really good thing, because children with dyslexia, for example, they might struggle to read and write and do all the lessons that they're meant to do in the school system, but they might be really creative, they might think really innovatively, so they might be able to come up with a solution to something that neurotypical children might not be able to. So I would like to think the school that I was in teaches children to actually celebrate it. Everyone's brains are different. Doesn't mean you're categorized into a certain way. Like, we are all different, and we all have different skills. We all have different weaknesses that we have to work on, and that's just how we are as humans. That's, it'd be boring if we were all the same. But I think in terms of the labeling, I think we have got, again, it links to knowledge, and the more knowledge you have, the more apparent things are going to be, and the more that people are trying to help. So if a child is labelled with, I don't know, autism, that's because they will be able to have access to teams that can come out and support them, to be able to work alongside the teachers to adapt the lessons in the best way possible, to help the parents, because it can be a grieving process if your child has been labelled.
Okay. Do you think then, like, not expanded knowledge means society is getting better or whatever? Like, that's the common belief now. Do you think that kids now are in a better place than they were 20, 30 years ago?
I think in terms of development of identity, I think we've probably introduced too much too soon.
Do you think your schooling was healthier than today's schooling?
Yeah.
Or less?
I think the experience I had of school there was way less pressure, way less stress. But again, this is the schema I have made is from a healthy upbringing, from a really good school, from not really that much alternative like realities outside of my experience. I've been really fortunate. I've come from a lovely family, you know, I've been brought up well, I went to lovely schools. Yeah, there was like still the kids that would probably nowadays be labelled ADHD, of going too far and trying to teach our children and get them equipped for today's society. Today's society is so far from what it used to be. We're trying to play catch up because we've introduced so much that's overwhelming children, and that's probably ultimately leads into this mental health crisis that we're in.
Interesting stuff.
Again, that is all my opinion, but I have had experience.
Your opinion is very valid because you've done this for 10 years and you ran SEM.
I think ultimately it comes down to resilience and what you're saying about the exposure to things that are going to push people outside of their comfort zone. That's what we teach the children. And I think a healthy way of instilling a positive mental health, because we have to remember it can be positive as well. Mental health's got such a stigma attached to it that it's so negative.
It's become a badge of honour, like, oh, my mental health's poor.
But you wouldn't say, oh, my physical health's poor.
Yeah,
you'd say I've got a cold.
And this is the other thing, is like, people are like, oh, it's just my ADHD, or it's just my OCD, or whatever. And it's like, listen to what you're actually like speaking over yourself. Like, it's, you know, it's just my crap strength, or whatever. We talk about like a physical side, or it's just my crap cardio. It's like, well, do something about it. Like, improve it, develop it. Like, push past it. Like, use it for your, like, we know, like, you know, we're ADHD or whatever. So I know I've got like things in place to make sure my work does well. Every 20, 30 minutes, if I start feeling myself like getting all jittery or whatever, I'll either play chess or I'll shadow box or I'll do something. Then I'm like back in the zone. But I don't like go. That's not an excuse for me to just be like an absolute mess and like.
This is the same with anxiety though. So when I'm saying like it's strategies to put in place so you don't get to that point where it is all consuming, because that's when it becomes fear.
Exposure.
Yeah. But strategies as well, so not just exposure, it's recognising, like, for example, if I felt really anxious and I was a bit overwhelmed and I had brain fog and I felt sick and my breath was really quick and I felt, you know, I've experienced all them things myself, like my chest's tight, literally feels like someone is sat on my chest. Like, right, I probably need to go get some fresh air, I need to go on a walk, go for a run. I probably need to write a few things down that are really busy in my brain just to try and clarify and like logically go through what I need to go through. Then when it's written down and out of my brain, it's not so bad, but it's just coming up with strategies that are, and again, I guess if you've not had that healthy knowledge and the understanding of working things out for yourself and understanding yourself and your identity, that's when people become overwhelmed and don't know what to do with it. So I'd like to think there is a place for teaching children this, but teaching them about themselves and not overloading it with everything that they don't necessarily need to know at that age.
Last thing I'll say is, like, in training we have something called progressive overload. So I wouldn't just put you on a 100 kilo bench. You'd start on 20 kilos.
Start on air.
You'd start on 20 kilos and then over time you'd like build up the volume, you'd build up the weights. And so, you know, over 6 months, a year, whatever, you'd be on 100 kilos, but you'd build that up. I think it's the same. We need to overload stress. So kids need to be exposed to more and more stress so they can handle it. Because ultimately, weight training is just being exposed to more, progressive overload is being exposed to more and more stress.
And I think, again, so this links that there's so many strategies that schools are trying to implement to do that. So, for example,
they're doing it incorrectly.
Some elements are correct, so through play, right? They're introducing like risk elements. So they're saying, right, you've got pallets, you've got slides, you've got this, you can build whatever you want, but risk assess it yourself. If you build in pallets that are like 10 high, someone will fall and hurt themselves. What do you learn from that? Probably don't build it to 10, we'll probably build it to 5. So there's some really good ways of getting children to risk assess the situation themselves, because again, they're then learning, I don't need to be anxious or scared about that because I can actually put that within my control. But there is also things that are outside of their control, and that's when it's hard, because we know what needs to be put in place for a child to develop a good level of understanding and whether they need to be anxious about it or not. But at certain ages they don't. So it does need to be progressively overloaded, and there's ways you can do that. And I think the more they can be outside, building, hands-on, experiencing the wider world, like that's what a lot of people are scared of. So get them outside. That's where Montessori schools were. Anyway, won't go into that, but yeah, forest schools, stuff like that, great. Because they're outside, they're learning life skills and developing as a human, not just as a little academic that's going through the school system and potentially be institutionalized by the end of it.
Governments, they put kids into education to make workers who go on. They do a 9-to-5 job, pay their taxes, get their mortgage. They're in a noose of a mortgage for 20, 30 years. They then eventually pay the mortgage off, leave their job, get a pension, but then they're still paying VAT on everything. Eventually they die, can be taxed on the things they pass down, and the cycles. And that's why I hate the sort of societal norms around that.
I'd like to think that the curriculum is changing to boost more creativity, to boost more entrepreneurial skills, to kind of instill life skills that make children follow like a unique path, because I do think it was a knowledge-based curriculum, and arguably that knowledge wasn't beneficial for the wider world, or it was for the government because it was forcing them down in particular. Yeah.
Really insightful stuff today.
Yeah, I have
taking loads of your time up. Thank you so much for sharing your stuff.
No worries.
Obviously I've got like really strong opinions on the fence. I know that you have share a lot of opinions, but then you've got a way bigger.
I think it's just experience.
You've got way more insight into all of this, so you've got a really valid opinion. Cool.
Thank you.